Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 764 of the Juicebox Podcast. What's up, everybody? Today on the podcast, I'm going to be speaking with Irene. She's the mother of a child with type 1 diabetes. I think she's got like 1,000 kids or something, like so many kids. And she's also a registered nurse. I looked back at the notes that she sent me before we recorded, and I gotta be honest with you, I don't know if this is the stuff we talked about or not. All I know for certain is that I had a good time talking to Irene, and that is always a good sign for the episode. While you're listening today, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you are a U.S. resident and you want to help people with type 1 diabetes, you can do that right now while you're sitting on your butt. Go to t1dexchange.org/juicebox. Join the registry. Fill out the survey completely. Fill it out completely. And you've done just that. It only takes a few minutes, and it's completely easy to do. This show is sponsored today by the glucagon that my daughter carries, Gvoke HypoPen. Find out more at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. The podcast is also sponsored today by Touched by Type 1. Head to touchedbytype1.org or find them on Instagram or Facebook. Why am I saying or? Do all three. Go to touchedbytype1.org, find them on Facebook, and find them on Instagram, and then follow them and see what they're up to.
My name is Irene. I am a mother of 6. My fourth child, who's my oldest son, is our T1D, and I'm also a registered nurse.
Okay. Now, you listen to this podcast?
I do. I found the podcast. Let's see. He was diagnosed late December 2019, and I found the podcast probably like 2 to 3 weeks later, and started listening to it on my drive to and from work.
So the reason I asked is because when you told me you had 6 kids, in your mind, were you like, he's going to ask me.
Oh, he's going to have a field day with this.
I don't even. First of all, did you find some of them? Are they rented? Did you adopt them? Like, or they all came? I don't want to be indelicate, but did they all come through your birth canal?
Did they all come out of my business?
Yeah.
So 5 out of the 6 did. My oldest daughter is 20 years old. She is my biological child from my irresponsible college days.
Does she know that? I guess she does now, but
yes. No, she knows it. We're very open discussion about things.
So we're gonna call. I have 1 through 6 listed in front of me, so I'm just gonna call number 1 Kegger, and then
number 1 Kegger,
and then she's only 20.
DC party clubs.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, she's 20 years old.
How old are they in order? 20, then what?
14.
Okay.
And she is not biologically mine. She's biologically my husband's.
Okay.
From a previous relationship that he had. And we married almost 13 years ago. And then we have 4 children together.
I'm getting it.
And so then there's a 10-year-old girl and a 7-year-old boy, and that's James. He's our kiddo with type 1.
Okay.
And then the next boy is about to turn 6 in 3 weeks.
Okay.
And he has some other health issues that were diagnosed right around when James was diagnosed. So we just had our whole world turned upside down. And then there is the baby, who is not really a baby anymore. He's 2.5. And at the time that both of his older brothers were being diagnosed, he was about 2.5, 3 months old.
Yeah. So all this happened around 3 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah. We're right around the 2.5 year mark from our diagnosis.
Okay. I think I understand. And at what point in this story did your vagina fall off? Was it just recently?
So it was after the sixth baby,
Yeah.
and I actually had actually did have complications, and
well, yeah,
the night
Irene.
I know, and we don't live in Utah, and we're not practicing Roman Catholics.
Did you hear it? Did you hear it hit the floor? Did it get caught in your pant leg, or what happened exactly? That's terrible. I'm sorry. That's so many babies.
You're fine. You're fine. No, but it's funny because the baby was born in September, and I was 4 days post surgery, like GYN surgery, when I was sitting on the couch with my husband one night as James, who was never much of an eater, told us that he had finished his dinner, finished his brother's dinner. He was still hungry, and mid-sentence ran for the bathroom again. And I was like, oh my God, he has diabetes.
Because you're a nurse and you knew.
And I was like, and we had just been talking about, we had noticed the frequent urination for several weeks, but he had kind of had he had just started kindergarten. He had kind of other, I don't like the bathroom at school. And I was like, oh, he holds it all day, and then he's got to come home and go to the bathroom. And when he was falling asleep on the kitchen floor, I was like, oh, full day kindergarten is such a big transition. And there's a new baby, and there's our other son had just been diagnosed with all these neurological conditions, and we were doing all this PT and OT and speech. And so I, like every other parent, right, I had all these other explanations. And then we just, kind of slowed down. We were on Christmas break, and we had this night where I was like, this is not kindergarten transition.
Yeah.
His pants are falling off of him. He can't finish putting his Hot Wheel tracks together without running to the bathroom. Our oldest daughter had made a comment do you know he ate a whole box of Nutri-Grain bars today? And we just started talking about how often he was refilling his water bottle. And my husband was like, hey, he started wetting the bed. I work night shifts.
Yeah.
My husband was like, a couple times he's wet the bed in the middle of the night. And I was like, oh God, it was a Saturday night. I was like, we cannot wait till Monday. We got to go.
Right. When the hell do you people have sex? I don't even understand. I can't, this story is fascinating, but if you work the night shift, I can't figure out the rest of it. I'm looking here, 20, 14, 10, 7, 6, 2.5. You're on the night shift. I don't know what's going on. You guys meet in a parking lot at a Denny's on your break? What do you do? Just tell me real quick. Is it as he's going to work? I just want to know when it happens, and then we'll get past it, I promise.
So I work 12-hour night shifts, so I work 3 or 4 nights a week, which means I am home some nights a week. But my husband also works, he works split shifts. So he's out the door at 5 a.m. He's home by 9:30 for a portion of the day. And then he's back out the door at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and he's home by 4:30. You just figure it out.
All right, fine. I'm going to get a clock and a chart and a graph, and I'm going to figure out exactly when all these children were made. Irene, I'm so sorry, because before we started recording, I made you put on the headphones that now I hate. So,
you're fine. I'll get rid of them.
I'm sorry.
All right. Is that?
You have to let him switch back over. Are you there? Hello?
Did that work?
Yeah, you're there. He just had to switch back to the computer. That's all. They were great, except as you spoke, it was weird. As you spoke in longer sentences, your voice faded away.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So I was like, damn. And, all right. How old are you?
I'm 40.
Wow. It's a lot of living, Irene. Hold on a second. Do you feel tired? Are you tired all the time?
Sometimes I am really tired.
How do you manage? So this is interesting. So your oldest obviously isn't in need constantly of things. It's probably college age, right?
Yeah, she is. She's in her second year of college, but she actually has junior standing because she's a real go-getter and took every AP course she could in high school. So she entered her first year of college. Actually, she was a sophomore by the end of her first semester.
When you drop off your baby to college, that you made in college, is the last thing you say to her, please, for the love of God, do not come home pregnant?
Get pregnant. So she spent her first year of college, fortunately, virtual at her grandparents'.
Oh, okay.
Because of COVID. And then, when we took her in the fall, I was like, you have to remember, like, sometimes we make bad decisions when we're not really an adult, and then we have to decide how to take responsibility for those.
And then one day we have to drive it to college. So please be careful.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
And she did not love campus life. So she spent a semester on a campus in Pennsylvania, and then was like, I want to come home. This isn't for me. So she's actually back home and going to a great university that is local to us.
Oh, good. And that explains why you and I are getting along so well.
Right.
We grew up in the same place.
Yeah.
Yeah. There are people listening right now that are horrified that we're making fun of your child like this. And they don't understand. You should live here. It's all fine.
Right. And it's always been an open conversation. I mean, like, age appropriate, but it's always been an open conversation, because how do you not give your children the truth? Like, my husband is adopted. It's a closed adoption, but his parents have always been open with him about it. Like, it was never this big, shocking revelation for him.
Well, being serious, if you were uptight about it, I would take that as an indication that you hadn't dealt with it well, like that you're so loose about it. I don't take anything that you have said seriously about this, in the last 10 minutes. I mean, if you are serious about any of the things that we've said about your oldest, you're a psychopath. So I don't believe you are, and I hope people understand we're joking, but nevertheless. Okay, so are there any other autoimmune issues in the family?
So I have one cousin on my dad's side who has Graves' disease. That's the only autoimmune that I know of.
Okay.
And then other than that, like, there's a lot of asthma and allergy, which isn't like truly thought of as autoimmune, but it does have the whole inflammation kind of component to it.
That's how I think of it. Yeah. Okay. And then in your family proper, you said James' younger brother has something, but it's not autoimmune.
It's not autoimmune. He has something called periventricular leukomalacia.
Why does he have that? Like, to test your spelling skills? Wait, go ahead. Try it again. Ventricular. I think this is heart related. Go ahead.
No. Leukomalacia. It's brain related.
Oh my God. Hold on a second.
It's abbreviated PVL. Just Google PVL.
I found it. I didn't spell any of the words right. And I still found it. Wow. Characterized by death or damage of softening of white matter in the inner part of the brain. How do you learn about this?
So as a baby, he had developmental delays, and, we just noticed that, he was our fifth child. We just noticed that he wasn't doing things as soon as his siblings had, and he was just kind of behind in his milestones in general. And initially, when he was really little, and we approached it with our pediatrician, they're like, oh, he's the fifth kid. Like, you guys are just so intuitive and calm as parents. You're anticipating his needs. His siblings are anticipating. Give him time, give him time. And he wasn't catching up. And we reached a point a little bit after he turned 1 that I self-referred to early intervention to start getting him assessed. And initially, they just referred to this as like global developmental delays, but we started speech therapy, we started occupational therapy. We really weren't getting anywhere. So I kept pushing. This was like, something's not right. We got on multiple waiting lists to have him more formally evaluated by a developmental pediatrician or a neurologist. And
unlike type 1 diabetes, it's not life threatening. So you sit on wait lists for months, sometimes years. And we were on a wait list with the developmental pediatrician that's associated with the hospital I work at. We were on a wait list with Children's National. We were on a wait list in Baltimore with Kennedy Krieger. We were on a wait list with UVA, and we got off of UVA's wait list first. So we went down to UVA and he was assessed, and they actually diagnosed him with mild cerebral palsy with something called hypotonia, which is where his muscles are like loose or weak and he just doesn't have stamina in his muscles. And they did blood work and they did an MRI, and the MRI is how they diagnosed the periventricular leukomalacia. Mm-hmm. They actually could see a brain injury that had been caused at some point by a lack of oxygen. And then that injury caused the periventricular leukomalacia.
That leads to the cerebral palsy.
That leads to the cerebral palsy and leads to the hypotonia and the learning disabilities and the ADHD and all the things that come with it.
Wow. Well, that's a lot. And this is, Jesus. And that's happening as your son's being diagnosed with type 1 as well?
Right. So baby was born early because I was having pregnancy complications. Baby was born mid-September. And then with a 2-week-old infant, I drove the hour and a half down with my infant, with my, at that time, 3-year-old child down to UVA to do this assessment. And then we were given all these diagnoses with the CP and the hypotonia, and told, you know, he needs an MRI, he needs all this blood work, you need to see a genetics team. So we went home, we came back in November, we did a ton of blood work, saw genetics, we went home, we went back in December to have the MRI because it had to be done under sedation with an anesthesiologist. Mm-hmm. And then they called us 2 days later to give us the results of the MRI. And it was devastating, but at the same time, it opened doors because prior to that, our insurance company wouldn't cover any speech or OT or PT or anything, right, because his diagnosis didn't meet their inclusion criteria. So once we had this diagnosis, it opened up doors for getting him more care and support.
Is it a progressive issue or does it plateau?
It is not progressive, thank God. Okay. So it won't get worse. His speech is actually with really intense speech therapy has improved. He's in kindergarten this year. He's really flourished in kindergarten. And then through occupational therapy, he's uses utensils now, which he before, and I mean a year and a half of occupational therapy, he couldn't eat soup, or if he wanted ice cream, he would literally eat it with his hands because holding a spoon was too difficult. Wow. He didn't really start dressing himself till this past summer. So how many 5-year-olds don't dress themselves? It was those type of things. And now he can get himself dressed and undressed. Potty training was really late. So he is flourishing. He's making tons of gains. It just takes him so much longer to get there and to do things.
Sure. Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay. I was looking more about it, and this just seems like it's such a random thing, right? The ways it can happen. Yeah.
Yes, it's random. And nobody was looking at him for this because it most typically happens in premature babies. Mm-hmm. And he was not a premature baby. Prematurity is one of the highest risk factors. And he was a full term 10-pound baby.
Wow. Jeez.
Nobody was oh, and it was so frustrating at the time because, as I'm sure you see, you can have mild to severe, and what type of interventions you need can be vague. And some kids develop a seizure disorder. Some kids don't. Some kids have the cerebral palsy. Some kids don't. And so you don't know what you're really dealing with. You just have to get into it and deal with it day to day and kind of see what their lives look like and what happens.
Okay. Wow. I appreciate you sharing that with me. Jeez. Now I feel bad about making fun of your vagina earlier. And,
no, you're we're pretty used to it. Like, I've had someone offer, like, looks at my shopping cart at Costco and they're like, what do you do? Like, run a daycare? And I'm like, nope, this is just for my kids. And they're like, do you need me to buy you a television? Do you need a new hobby? Like,
I will take anything. Thank you. Would you like to babysit? I don't know you, but if you just picked 2 of these kids and took them, that'd be amazing. Okay. So now so we know how you saw the type 1. Right. Once you recognized it, do you take him right to the hospital? You go to a doctor? Which did you do?
No, it was a Saturday night. 2 of our daughters were at sleepovers. The youngest 2 boys were already in bed. So I explained to James, I was like, we have to go to the doctor tonight. I didn't tell him that I thought he had diabetes because he has no frame of reference for what diabetes is. And there was a part of me that was hoping that we were going to get there and I was going to embarrass myself and they were going to be like, oh, silly mom, like he doesn't have diabetes. You're such a worrywart. He's got a urinary tract infection or something.
Right.
So I explained it to my husband, but I did pack up my breast pump and I packed clean underwear for James and myself. And I was like, we're getting admitted. I know what's going on here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we left the hospital that's closest to us. I wouldn't take my worst enemy there. So we got on the highway. We were just about to get on the highway when he had to stop and go to the bathroom again. So we stopped at a gas station, like right before you get on the interstate, and begged this lady to let us use their bathroom. And that's when I decided, I work at a hospital that is a level 1 trauma center that has a pediatrics program. But we passed 2 other hospitals on the way there. And I just was like, I don't know if he's in DKA. I don't know how bad his blood sugars are. So we went to a smaller hospital that is affiliated with the hospital I work for, and that I knew there are 5 hospitals in that healthcare system, that if we went there and I was right, he would be a priority for placement into our pediatric unit. And that I also knew that emergency room had board certified pediatricians. So I felt comfortable going there. So we went there and we walked up to the check-in desk, and I just still couldn't quite bring myself to say it. And so I looked at this registrar, this non-medical person, and I was like, yeah, my son is urinating a lot. And I think he needs to see a doctor. And the nurse looked up and she was like, come on back here. And she said, well, what's going on? And I said, I think he has diabetes. And she was like, well, why do you think that? So I explained everything. And she grabbed one of their technicians to get an AccuCheck before doing anything. And the meter just read high. And it's the one time in that first space of time that I cried. I just started to cry. And the nurse just focused in on James and got his weight and his vital signs. And then she pulled out her insulin pump and showed it to him. And she said to him, guess what? I have diabetes too.
Gvoke HypoPen has no visible needle and is a premixed autoinjector of glucagon for treatment of very low blood sugar in adults and kids with diabetes ages 2 and above. Find out more. Go to gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. Gvoke shouldn't be used in patients with insulinoma or pheochromocytoma. Visit gvokeglucagon.com/risk. If you're looking for community and support around your diabetes, I'd like to suggest to you that you find the Juicebox Podcast private Facebook group, which now has nearly 30,000 members in it. That's a lot of people who can offer you support, guidance, or just a shoulder to, not cry on. We don't cry, but some support that you might need sometimes. It's called Juicebox Podcast Type 1 Diabetes. It's a private group, and all you need to do is answer a few questions to get in, just to prove to the algorithm you're a real person, and then you're on your way. As a matter of fact, I'm talking to people in the group right now. This is what I said to them. Does anyone live near me and want to record ads for next week? I'm tired. And while we were chatting, I said, if anybody throws their name in here, I'll give them a shout out in the next episode's ads. So, very quickly, who we got? Looks like Kelly, Elizabeth, Blue, Phil, Kristen, Dana, Brandy. Yes, you made it, Brandy. There was a cutoff. Cheyenne asked me to shout out her daughter, but then didn't tell me her daughter's name. So if you're Cheyenne's daughter and you're hearing this right now, your mom screwed up. Hold it against her all day. Who else? John and Mary Beth. Isabel didn't ask to be shouted out, but it's happening anywhere. This person says, I'm here for my shout out. Call me Professor Ellie. All right, Professor Ellie, you're in. Monica, Billy Joe, thinks they missed the window. They'll be excited to see. Here's somebody from Brisbane. Is it Brisbane? L? Did I say it right? Anyway, you should check out. Jump over. It's a great group of people. They're really lovely. Seriously. You can't go wrong. It's absolutely free to be in, and you're going to see a ton of support there. Rebecca, Roxanne, Heather, Mike, Hannah, Scott, Denny, and Vera. Thank you for listening to the podcast and for being a part of the group on Facebook. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com to the sponsors and to the Facebook page. Let's get back to Irene.
Guess what? I have diabetes too. And I was right about your age when I was diagnosed. And she was like, look at this cool thing. It's like having a computer in my pocket. And it was just, it was amazing to have someone right there who like understood and could say something to him that was so reassuring and wasn't frightening.
Irene, I have to tell you, I hear a lot of these stories and made me upset telling yours. So I sometimes fly right through them, and I'm always surprised what's going to make me upset. This time it was the nurse having diabetes. I was like, that's a plot twist right out of like a movie. And now I'm upset. Hold on a second. Jeez.
No, don't be upset.
I held off crying until they took the baby back. I felt like I was really doing something back then. I remember getting put into a little like waiting room, and to call it a room was generous. It was basically
a closet.
Yeah, it's a closet with two chairs in it and a magazine. And I remember crying in that hole, and then falling asleep, and then being woken up in the morning, and Arden's like literally it felt like she had tubes coming out of everywhere and wires and everything.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So, geez. I'm supposed to be better at this, Irene.
No.
Jeez. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
I'm fine, except I can't find my next question because I'm suddenly sitting in a hospital in Virginia. My kid's 2 years old, and I can't break away from it for some reason. I guess what I want to understand is that being a nurse, and the mother of a newborn child, and someone who's seeing something with another child, like when you find a quiet space after that, how do you prioritize things?
So, I think this speaks to like, I have kind of that like stoic, like compartmentalize. So, we get him back into the ER, they start an IV, they draw his labs, they get IV fluids going. And I'm realizing, now my mistake in coming to this hospital and not driving another 25 minutes down the highway, because now he's going to have to be transported. And I am not going to let him be separated from me. So I just went into problem solving mode, and I like called my husband and I was like, he's got it. He's got diabetes. They're starting everything. They're calling our hospital to get him a bed, and we got to wait for his labs to figure out, does he go to the pediatric ICU or can he go to the floor, and does he need the insulin drip? And I'm like, oh my God, my car's here and we can't leave our car here, but I'm not putting him in an ambulance and driving without him. He'll be terrified. So fortunately we have family that's local, and I'm like calling that family, and a nurse that actually used to work in the pediatric ICU at my hospital pops her head in, and she was like, oh my God, I thought it was you. And she like wraps her arms around me and she was like, we got you. And she took over James. She basically like kicked out the nurse that had been assigned to him, and I was like, nope, he's my patient. Like, I'm taking him. So I just went into this like problem solving mode of, thank God she was willing to hold my keys until a family member of mine like showed up there that night to retrieve my car so that I could go with James and the medics to the hospital, and we didn't have to be separated. And I just was so laser focused on, what do we need to do for James? How do we deal with logistics of this? How do we tell our older daughters? How do I keep feeding the baby, even though I'm physically separated? That there wasn't that moment until we were home, and we spent 2 nights in the hospital, and my husband and I kind of traded back and forth. And the moment of like realizing, like, I remember the endocrinologist coming in the next morning and being like, you're a nurse, so you get this. And I was like, stop. You're right. I'm a nurse. My entire background is adult critical care and wound care. I'm not a pediatric nurse. I've never worked in an endocrinology practice. And the diabetics I see are either in the ICU in crisis, and I can manage the business out of your DKA. I can titrate your insulin drip. I can correct your electrolytes and then send you to the medical floor for them to finish getting you stable and get you discharged. And I can help you when you've gotten to the point that you have wounds or that you're recovering from an amputation because for whatever your barriers were, your A1Cs were high, your blood sugars were high, and you have complications. I don't know the day-to-day in between.
Right.
And I remember saying to this endocrinologist, I want you to talk to me like I'm stupid, because I have to do right by him. And all I can see in my head is the complications and all the adult patients I've taken care of who have been type 1 or type 2, who haven't gotten what they needed. And now in their adulthood, they're facing all these complications. I was like, you have to talk to me like I'm stupid, because that is the weight that I feel, is like literally looking at this 5-year-old's feet going, I have to protect his feet, and looking at him and being like, oh my God, I have to do everything right for him so that he never winds up on dialysis.
Yeah. Your whole perspective is from that area. Yeah. And
yes.
Well, that's really wonderful that you had the wherewithal in the moment to be like, no, I don't understand any of this. Just you start at step 1 and let's go. The part I understand is not fun. So
right. No, it's not. Yeah. It's not.
Are there fun parts that you can tell me about? There aren't, by the way, but at least basics. Right. And
well, and I have to say, our hospital and our endocrinology team, like, they talked to us about pre-bolusing in the hospital. And we had conversations about, like, ideally, you're going to give him his insulin, and then 15 minutes later, he'll eat. If you're having problems with knowing how much he's going to eat or how much he's not going to eat, then, we're going to give him half of his insulin. We're going to wait 10 to 15 minutes. He's going to eat. And then 20 minutes after he's eaten, you're going to carb count and figure out what insulin he's missing and give it to him again. to make up for the carbs that aren't covered. So I feel like we got really, in that sense, better education than a lot of other people did.
Okay.
And I got all the initial education. And when they were like, okay, you guys are great to go home, because he was not in DKA, I was like, oh, no, you're not sending us home. Tomorrow, you're going to do all this education again with my husband, because I can teach him, but what if he has different questions that I didn't think to ask and I don't know the answer? And I was like, he needs his opportunity.
Yeah.
I was like, because he is going to have to feel comfortable and safe, because I leave at 6 o'clock at night and I don't get back until 8 o'clock in the morning. And I got to know that they're okay.
Right. You talked earlier about how you guys split up the time in the hospital, and it's been stuck in my head since then. It's one of my least favorite things about parenting, is that when you have multiple children, it's so hard. Yeah. At some point, someone misses something.
Yeah. And I was insistent. I was like, you can't discharge James tonight solely because my husband has to have the same opportunity that I had.
Right.
And we've always approached parenthood as team. Like, it's not 50-50, but it's team. And there's nothing that,
well, you didn't have,
well, I shouldn't say no.
You didn't have,
I'm sorry.
You didn't have to make the decision that only one of you gets the information. Like, we have something coming up in a number of months where it's obviously not a health issue, but my son is going to graduate from college on the same weekend as Arden's senior prom.
Oh, goodness.
And his college is not near our home.
Right.
So we are literally trying to figure out how to, like, see Arden off to the prom and then get into a car and make a long drive and then pull ourselves together and get up in the morning and go to, like, Cole's graduation.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, there's that one moment in the middle where you're talking about it at first and you go, we're not going to split up, right? Like, you're not going to stay with her for her prom. And I'm like, we can't do that. And we can't skip one of those things and tell either of them, hey, I'm sorry, we can't see you at your prom because Cole's graduating, because that makes sense, right? Like, if you had to make the decision, that does make sense in my head. Like, he's graduating from college, but it won't make sense to her. And
no, it won't.
And vice versa. So, and it's just a difficult thing as a parent to do. It's
really like when we gave James, we gave him an old iPhone that is not on a, like, cell plan. Like, it's an old iPhone that we're just connecting to the Wi-Fi for his Dexcom, right? And our second oldest daughter was, like, livid. She was like, he gets an iPhone before I do. I was like, he gets diabetes. Like, I was like she and I, and she was like 11, 12 years old. How does an 11, 12-year-old understand? Like, he gets finger sticks, he gets injections, he gets all this stuff. Like, and it's not like he's on TikTok or something. Like, he's carrying this.
In a 504 meeting once, I had a teacher say, how am I supposed to explain to the other kids that she has a cell phone and they can't have one? And I said, tell them if they want to get diabetes, they can have a cell phone. Otherwise, they should probably shut up.
Oh, I literally said to her, I said, well, if you would like for me to start checking your blood sugar 6 times a day and wear a Dexcom, and I'll give you saline injections. And she was like, well, if that means I can have a phone. And I was like, that is the most insane thing you've ever said.
Yeah, well.
I was like, we're not actually going to do that.
I don't even know how you would afford to buy 6 people a phone.
I know.
I mean, there's a world, like, if these 2 kids, say the first 2 are ne'er-do-wells, there's a world where one day you might be buying 8 cell phones a month. You're gonna need a job just for that.
It's hand-me-downs. It's hand-me-downs, Scott.
I even just mean, like, the service for them.
I know. Well,
you might have to incorporate.
My husband has this old school, we'll never give it up, this old school plan that he got when he was in college with a cell phone carrier. And we will never give this plan up, because you pay your base and then you can add up $20. Unlimited lines for $5 a month.
$5. Wow.
That's how old this plan is.
Are you guys still paying for minutes?
No, it was like when they first started rolling out, like, the unlimiteds. It's insane. Like, and every once in a while when we wind up having contact with the company, they're like, oh, we should look at your plan. And then they look at it and they're like, oh, nobody has this plan anymore. You should never change your plan. We're like, we know.
Okay, don't worry. We're not changing this. It's the only thing can I tell you something, kid? This is the only thing working out for us. Have you considered having any of the other kids tested for antibodies for type 1?
So 3 of ours have done TrialNet. Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. Did you get good results? Or
2 of the girls have done TrialNet. My oldest has opted not to, and she was old enough that I completely let it be her decision. But the next 2 girls, I bribed them with chocolate to let me do TrialNet because we were able to do that at home finger prick.
Yeah.
So yeah, I bribed them with multiple chocolate bars.
I mean, whatever works. Honestly. Yeah.
And then our middle son, our son who has the neurological concerns, we just did it with him this past fall, and he had a Pokemon toy that he wanted, and we ordered the Pokemon toy and waited till it arrived, and then we're like, here's the toy, here's the kit, like we get this tube filled, and then you get the toy. And then our youngest is he turns 2.5 in a couple of weeks, and you have to be 2.5 to do it. So we will probably do it at some point in the next year.
Did you get results back, or was this very?
We did. So none of our 3 that have tested have any antibodies.
Wow. Well, that's good news.
And for me, it's been a peace of mind. Like when I see, so my middle son, recently was definitely having a growth spurt, and the increase, I want something to drink, I want something to eat. I was able to be like, he didn't have antibodies. He's 5 years old, almost 6. This is an appropriate time for a growth spurt. He's fine. It's okay. And it's given me a little bit of reassurance. And I think if any of our kids did have antibodies, for me, it would have been that opportunity to talk with our pediatrician about what's our plan for monitoring so that we catch this before we have to be admitted to the hospital, before we have blood sugars in the 700s, and that we can avoid that.
I want to ask you about your management style, because if you and your husband are not in the house at the same time, so let's set up some parameters first.
Sure.
Your kid, James, has had diabetes for 2.5 years.
Yes.
It sounds like he's using a CGM.
Yes.
A pump.
Yeah, he's on the Omnipod DASH. Okay. So we got home from the hospital. We had that JDRF bag of hope, and I was rifling through that backpack, and I found a leaflet for Dexcom, and I was like, what is this? I want to know about this.
Right.
Because we were definitely finger sticking more than in the hospital. It's called AC and HS, before meals and at bedtime was, and then that 2 a.m. check that we're all told to do, newly diagnosed. Well, we were definitely doing more than that. And I was blowing up our endo with I'm following what you told me. I'm carb counting. I'm giving correction. And his blood sugars are still 250, 300. This is not okay. We have to do something better than this. Mm-hmm. So I just called Dexcom directly. He was in the, it was the Tuesday after he was diagnosed, right? He was diagnosed late on a Saturday. It was Tuesday morning. I'm on the phone with Dexcom, and I'm like, this is my insurance. This is my kid. This is my endo. I want this. How do I get it? And I spoke to a Dexcom representative who was like, let me start researching your insurance. Let me reach out to your endo and get the scripts. They were like, this is not a problem. We'll get this figured out, whether it's going to be DME or pharmacy. hung up the phone with them, called my insurance company, and I was like, you better approve this. Like,
when that kid calls you, I don't want to hear arguments. Yeah.
Right. I was like, what's the criteria? Do I need a prior approval? Because I'm going to hang up the phone with you and then I'm going to call my endo. And
Right.
Our insurance was like, yeah, not a problem. It's under your pharmacy benefit. They were like, typically you need to have had hypoglycemic events. And I was like, he's 5. He doesn't even know. He can't tell. He's unaware. So I was able to then call my endo and be like, you need to tell my insurance company that my child is hypoglycemic unaware. And they were like, yeah, well, most 5-year-olds are. And I was like, great. So I need that script.
Could they hear you winking through the phone, do you think?
Yeah, pretty much. And we picked up our Dexcom at the CVS 2 days later.
Wow. You made that happen. That's for sure.
And I just got on YouTube and I found a ton of videos of people putting them on. And I showed a couple of videos to my husband and I sought out videos specifically that were young children putting on a Dexcom. And so we showed James a couple of videos and we were like, all right, buddy, let's do it. And we put a Dexcom on. And the very next day we had our first appointment with one of the CDEs at the endo's office. And we went in and she started like talking about all the foods that we should avoid. And I was like, nope, we're not doing that. And I was like, I want to talk about a pump. And she was like, oh, no. You can't have a pump until he's been diagnosed for a year. And I was like, I'm going to stop you right there. I'm an ICU nurse. I'm familiar. I was like, I can finger stick all day long. I know how to give injections. I understand sliding scale. I understand correction. I was like, I also understand the importance of tight glycemic control to prevent complications. I was like, I'm very familiar with insulin drips. She was like, well, insulin drips are regular insulin and he's on Lantus and Humalog. And I was like, it's still the principle of the matter that with a pump, I can have better control. We can turn things off, turn things on. We can make adjustments as needed. I was like, I'm going to get that pump. And she was like, well, let's talk about this thing. And she pulled out a Dexcom and I was like, yeah, it's on his butt already.
We got that, lady.
I was like, we've had it for 48 hours.
Yeah.
Here's his receiver. I was like, we're done with that. We're moving on. And she just was like, well, your doctor will never sign off on the pump. And I was like, okay, we'll see about that. So we left that appointment. We had an appointment a week later with a nutritionist. We went over carb counting again. And again, I looked at the nutritionist and I was like, how do I get the pump? She was like, oh, we don't usually do that for about a year. And then you have to go to this class and then you have to meet with the trainers and you have to do a saline trial. It was this whole like lengthy process. And I was like, there's got to be a way around this. There has to be a way around this. And we met with our endo. We made adjustments. We were getting better control. And then we met a different CDE. We were maybe like a month out. We met a different CDE in our endo group who is a type 1 herself. And I was like, I want him on a pump. What do I have to do to get him on a pump? And she was like, I don't think there's any reason not to get him on a pump. She was like, you understand how to carb count. You understand how to finger stick. He's already on this, on the Dexcom. She was like, we just need to get you to the pump training class. And she was like, it's held once a month. And unfortunately, February's pump training class was actually yesterday. And she's like, but we'll get you into the March pump training class. And at that point, I was actually already listening to the podcast and had met a mom at our elementary school who also had a type 1 daughter who was on the Omnipod and the Dexcom also. And I had researched, I wanted nothing to do with Medtronic. If we went with Medtronic, there would be a push to use their CGM. And we were using the Dexcom already and comfortable with it. So I was like, well, why would we change? And then I was comparing the T-Slim and the Omnipod. And I was like, the shortest tubing for this T-Slim is 24 inches. And this kid is only 36 inches tall. I was like, what do you do with 24 inches of tubing on a kid that's 36 inches tall. Like, I was like, we're going to have to like wrap him in it. So that like really made me lean towards the Omnipod. So beginning of March, we went to pump training, and we had him with us, and we had him like look at the T-Slim and look at the Omnipod, and he held the T-Slim in his hand and he was like, this is really heavy. And he was like, I don't like this. And he was interested in the Omnipod also.
Wow.
And fortunately, I had learned from this mom who was at our elementary school, using the same endo that we use, that we needed to go back to our endo and say, we want to train directly with the Omnipod rep, and that the process would move a lot faster, because the process through our like endo's office and through our hospital would take us a month to 2 months to do.
Oh, but the Omnipod rep might have a shorter schedule.
Yes, much shorter schedule.
Right.
So the very next day, I was like, okay, my husband, myself, and my child were all in agreement that it's Omnipod. I went to Omnipod's website. I filled out their like intake form. We had met the rep. She had given me her cell phone number. I like text her and I was like, Mona, we're settled. We want the Omnipod. Like, I filled everything out on your website. Can you please help us expedite as quickly as possible?
Mm-hmm.
We called our endo. We were like, we're sold. This is what we want. We want to go with the rep, and we want to skip the saline trial. We want to go right to insulin. And again, it was that CDE that was a type 1 herself that was like, not a problem. She was like, I think you guys are a great candidate to go straight to insulin. Like, we'll get all the orders put in today.
Do you think they thought that because you're a nurse, or because of how assertive you were? And
because I'm a pain in the ass?
Well, hold on. Do you think she even believed that, or did she just want to get rid of you? She's like, you know what? Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
No, I think it was a little bit of both. I think it was, you are a parent who is knowledgeable, who's done her research, who's diligent for her child. And so we feel comfortable. And did some of that maybe come out of being a nurse? Yeah, maybe a little bit, but is some of it that I'm just a
persistent,
like persistent, when I know what I want, it's what I want, and I go after it.
Well, it's been clear through this whole story that you just made everything happen that you wanted to happen. Like,
yeah, I mean, and it's funny because I can't do it for myself, but I can do it for my kids. Like, if it's me personally, like I'll back down. I'll be like, oh, I don't want to bother that person.
Really?
But when it comes to my kids, like, whether it's, getting them accommodations for their IEPs or their 504s or getting them the medical care they need, or, any of those pieces, like, do not get in my way.
Well, you remind me of me because, we just recently had to switch back to Edge Park for Dexcom supplies. And, they act like, oh, it's all set up. It's going to happen automatically, right. Except then the year ends and they act like you've never bought these things before from them.
Right.
And then all of a sudden you're looking in the drawer and the pile's going down and down and down. And I call them up and I'm like, what's going on? Where are the Dexcom supplies? Oh, well, we need prior authorization from the doctor. And I said, excuse me. I apologize. I said, oh yeah, sure. Great. She's been using it for like, a decade or more, but let's act like it's never happened. Like, well, this is insurance for the year. We'll take care of it. I go, okay. And then 7 days later, I call back and I go, where are the Dexcom supplies? And then the person said the same thing to me. And I went, oh, no, stop. I was like, no, that's the same. Like, you're literally speaking the same words that the last person said to me 7 days ago.
Yeah.
You're never going to handle this. I'll take care of it. So I'm sorry, I'm dying. Give me a second. This is the end. One day I'm going to be right. One day I'm going to say this is the end. And then you're just going to hear like a loud thump on a table and people are going to be like, oh, shit, he was right. It was the end. So
we better find Arden on Instagram. Let her know her dad's not doing so well.
Call 911, sweetie. And by the way, don't look for Arden on Instagram. She doesn't like it when you do that.
No.
Yeah. She really, here's what happens. She goes, is this one of your people requesting my account? And
imagine. Having teenage daughters who also like, I love sarcasm and have a sense of sarcasm. I can just imagine Arden being like, could you make these people leave me alone? Like, I don't get it.
Who is this? Why are they bothering me? Did you hear her on the show last year?
I did. Yeah. I did. I just laughed.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated so much how there's this piece of her that is like, I don't know what the hell that is, Dad. Like, that's your problem. Like, I don't need to know these things because you take care of it for me. And my oldest daughter is, because she's going to school locally and living at home, has actually taken a job at the hospital I work at. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because she'll be like, yeah, I met this person and she's like, they like really like you. And she's like looking at me like, it's so weird that people like you.
Yeah.
Because my job now for the past several years is I'm not in the ICUs anymore. My job title is administrative director. It's like being, for lack of a better way to describe it, it's like being the charge nurse for the whole hospital. And
okay.
So it's a visible position. It's a 1,000-bed hospital. And if somebody, whatever the problem is, a supply issue, a staffing issue, a patient that has a concern, it's mine to deal with. I go to all of the like emergencies, like a patient's having a change in status, somebody has a respiratory or cardiac arrest. Like, so it's a very visible position.
And so you're around, people know you, and she's fascinated by that because you're just the chucklehead that got pregnant in college to her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Who's like done a pretty decent job pulling her life together.
Yeah. No. By the way,
good at it.
I feel like that goes without saying, right? But no, please, it doesn't matter here. Like this podcast is listened to absolutely, far and wide. And I go downstairs and say something and they look at me like I've never had a good idea in my entire life. And there's no reason why you would listen to me. And I'm not saying I'm right all the time. But you do sit there and you think, a great many people at least pause and listen when I'm talking. Like they might not you might not listen to the podcast and they go, wow, everything Scott just said was amazing. I'm going to go put it into action. Right. Like that I understand. But like I'm literally sometimes treated like a person who's broken into the house. Like, who's that? Why is he talking?
I get it.
Oh my God. But my point was going to be is that it's funny. I coughed and we changed directions.
I know.
But I basically told Edge Park, I'm like, I will do this. And it sucks, but I just went and did their job. I contacted the doctor's office. I contacted the nurse practitioner. I made it clear what was going on. I made it clear what they needed to do next. Then I started following up with people like I'm the assistant to like the most important person in the world. I'm like, Dr. Diabetes says you need to do this. Did you do it? Do it now. The next day, back on the phone again. Is it done? And you'd be surprised how quickly it gets done when you're assertive like that. And I wasn't rude
I am not
all.
surprised. I completely, because we went to pump class the first week of March 2020, right? And we were scheduled to do our Omnipod training. Like we were meeting the Omnipod rep at, I don't remember, it was like a Starbucks or something, like about 3 weeks later after class. And it was going to be on a Monday, right? Well, the Friday before our pump training, the world shut down for COVID. And we got this email that like the kids were going to stay home from school for 2 weeks. yada, yada, yada. My husband works for the school system, and, he got a notification not to report to work on Monday morning. And the first thing I did was call our pump trainer and be like, how does this impact our pump training on Monday?
I don't care what's happening in the world. We're doing this pump training.
It was like, we have to pump train. She was like, I can't meet with you in person. Like, I've got to go back to my leadership and figure out what we were doing. And I was like, okay, I need you to call me Monday morning. Obviously, I'll be home. And again, like, she was great. And she was like, we're trying to figure out like how to do it. And I was like, I have everything in hand. Like, I got to tell you, if this takes too long, I'm just going to read the manual, watch YouTube videos, and do it on my own. And she was like, no, hold on. And she did get back with us, and we actually were Omnipod's pilot for virtual training.
Oh, cool.
And so we got on this virtual platform, not Zoom. I don't remember, but they were using something else. And it was so funny because you could see like other people who were watching this.
Mm-hmm.
And I had gotten impatient. So by the time we got on it, I was like, yeah, I've got the thing programmed. Can you just like look at it and make sure I programmed it correctly?
They're all like, God, if she figures this out with YouTube, we're all out of a job.
I know.
I really want to tell you, I appreciate the way you are. I don't know if that's going to make sense or not, but like your conversation with me today exactly mimics the way you post on the Facebook board.
Oh.
And so like you are that person. Like you're not, there's no air about you. Like you're not pretending. And even what I mean about that is like your posts would appear to be, to some people, all over the place. I think of them as like well balanced. Like some people pick a lane and stick to it. They yell about one certain thing, or they care about one certain thing, or you're involved in like a myriad of conversations that if you, what do I mean? If someone looked at just one of your posts, they could they could look and go, oh, this person is leaning in this direction with their ideas or that direction, but you're not. You're very like centered, but in a very good way. Like you're not, I don't know, like sometimes people say centrist with their ideas and they think of it as poor, like you don't have a real opinion one way or the other, but you're not like that. You're everywhere.
No, I view it as you have to look at the individual, right? There's multiple ways to address things, and you have to look at the individual and what is right for that individual. And what meets their need.
Yeah. No,
right? So
you seem like a common sense person to me.
Yes. I think that's a good way to put it. Like, I just, if someone else is really happy with, low carb and MDI and it's working for you and you're having good outcomes, keep going.
Yeah.
Like keep going. And I just, and support people where they're at. Right. Because if you don't come in where they're at, they can't move forward. Yeah.
You can't talk down at people or talk up or be talking up to them either. You have to, you really do. I hate cliches, but, finding somebody's launch point and beginning there with them is it's a big deal.
Exactly.
And I'm even talking about like just conversationally, even like there's a post here from you that I remember. Like I looked, I whipped through your thread like this morning, like all of them, like everything you've posted. I just kind of ripped through it real quick. And it's just like you go from like complimenting a low carb person on a meal they put together, which I don't think you keep low carb, right? We
don't. I mean, we occasionally, I gotta be honest, we're not low carb. Right. We're just not. But and James's favorite breakfast is hot chocolate and instant oatmeal. Mm-hmm. I mean, that oatmeal is 44 carbs and his hot chocolate is another 15 carbs. And I plug that in his PDM and it calculates. And then because I know it's what he needs, I throw another full unit of insulin on it and I put it on an extended bolus. I've got other times where I look at a meal and it's somebody has shared a low carb meal and I'm like, hey, that looks good. Yeah. I think I want to eat that.
Yeah.
I might make that.
That's to me, that's great. Like, just, that you just, whatever seems to make sense in the moment, as down to like, there's a post on here from you where you're just like, hey, does anybody think like episode 514 should be an after dark? And then, and you're just like joking around. Like, so you're just a very, I don't know. I really don't know how to put it other than to say you feel very common sense to me. And I think that that's what's helping you through, all the things that you're seeing with some of your kids and in your schedule and your life. Like, it all seems well, unless you're out of your mind and you're hiding it for this. Would you cop to that now if you were just like, Scott, I'm on 3 Adderall right now and I'm barely holding it together?
I probably am a little out of my mind. But no, I mean, it's not that I don't look at the future. It's not that my husband and I don't have forward thinking. But we also are very much alike, take things as they are. And like, what does this moment need? What does this situation need? And we have other times where, like we tried a new spot for James's pod last night. We changed his pod and he's a lean, like he's a lean little guy. There's no pudge on him. Mm-hmm. We put my husband put his pod on his thigh, and I don't love this site. We had a lot of lows last night. I think it's actually that cannula might actually be like pretty close to the muscle, and it's like he's absorbing that insulin very quickly. Mm-hmm. And so we were up multiple times last night and we temp basal back some and we were still having low. So he gets up this morning. He's so tired and he's so cranky and he doesn't want to go to school. He wants to go back to bed. And I'm like, man, I don't want to every time be like, oh, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Like, where's the middle ground on this? Because I can see enough into the future. Like a teenage boy, if I'm always caving in elementary school and middle school and high school, is going to be like, oops, didn't write my paper. I better tell mom I had a rough night so I can stay home. So he was low this morning. He ate his breakfast and then he had another 32 uncovered carbs and I was still having a little trouble getting him back up. But I was like, all right, go back to bed and we'll reassess at 10 o'clock. And, James, we got his blood sugar back up. He slept for a little bit. And then he came downstairs a little bit after 10 o'clock and he was like, it's 10:15. I think I need to go to school. Like, that's the middle ground, right? Like, let him get the extra hour of sleep because he had a crappy, rough night. And we woke him multiple times, temp basal him down 10% for the next 5 hours for the school day because this site seems to be like super absorbing. Mm-hmm. And we'll figure out later tonight whether we're going to just keep going a temp basal down while this pod's on or whether we're going to move it to our typical like back of the arm or his upper buttocks. Yeah. Like,
I've done exactly what you're talking about. There are times when I've said to Arden, like, I don't care, get up and go. Like, and there are times where I'm like, you know what, this is reasonable. She's, we got out of bed this morning and I don't know, found out that her blood sugar was higher than we wanted it to be. And I'm going to give her a bunch of insulin. She can sit here for a half an hour while I make sure that A, that this wasn't too much insulin, and B, where I make sure it's working because I don't want to be in the situation where an hour and a half from now I'm texting her saying like, hey, we're going to make another large bolus, not knowing if the bolus is right. It's not near food. Like, like there's some things that are just common sense. And at some points too, you got to treat them like people who need some comfort too, without making them into somebody who goes, oh, I stubbed my toe, I can't do anything.
Yeah. And, and I think that's the trick, right? I listen to some of the adults you talk to who it is interesting. There are so many of them who I hear like, yeah, my parents kind of said like, you better figure this out. This is yours to do. but they're also very protective of their parents, and they don't want to say that like they didn't have support from their parents. And I listen to parents now who are talking about, how much their kids are doing independently. I want us to, in a lot of ways, follow James's lead, but I don't want to baby him so much that like he wants to go to college like on the West Coast, and
you don't know how to do that.
We don't know how to do that.
You're shooting for the middle. You're just always kind of shooting for the middle.
Yeah, exactly. So like this summer, he wants to go to camp. We did a family camp last summer that was just a weekend. He loved it. He wants to go back to camp, but he wants to do the full week with the other kids without his parents. So we had great conversation with the camp coordinators about like, what does he really need to be able to do independently to go to camp for 7 days without a parent, and what can you guys realistically do for him?
Yeah.
He doesn't do his pod changes. He doesn't change his Dexcom. Like, he has put the insulin in his pod a few times. He has pushed the buttons on the, touch screen of his PDM a few times. He usually picks his site, but he doesn't do it independently. And if I say to him, like, he can finger stick himself, but he doesn't want to. So if I say to him like, hey, James, can you do your finger stick? He's like, oh, it's so much work.
Well, listen,
like
last night, I mean, my kid's almost 18. And last night, I came into the same room with her and I said, I forget what happened. I do forget what happened. Oh, she just got home from her Disney trip from school. And we're still we're still getting her settings adjusted back because they were significantly different for walking around in the heat at Disney.
Oh, I'm sure.
And so we had this, we adjust it back a little bit, and it was going okay, but there's more to do. And I said to her, I'm like, I just want to do a finger stick here because I want to make sure that the next thing I do is 100% right, because I think I'm right here, and I want to be done with this. So anyway, I'm sitting closer to her bag than she is. And I pulled out the meter, the Contour Next one, which is available at contournext.com/juicebox. And I pull out the test strip, and I stuck the test strip in it, and I handed her the lance and the meter. And there was I reached my hand out with it, and she looked at me, and we were just both staring at each other, thinking the same thing. Like, you're doing this, not me. Like, like she's looking at me like, I mean, she had her laptop open. She was watching something, and I know she wanted to just stick her hand out and get her blood sugar tested, and probably
stick out her middle finger for you.
I pushed the meter into her hand, and I was like, I don't know what you think's happening here, but I'm not doing this. So she there's no problem. She tested her blood sugar, but there was that moment where both of us were like, "You're doing this, not me." And she had the same feeling. It's just it's tiresome doing stuff like that over and over and over.
Well, and it's, I've had times where I say to him, like, okay, this is your carb count. Like, you need to bolster yourself for dinner. And he kind of gives me the groan, and I'm like, oh, like, you got to do it a few times to prove you can do it at camp. Right. And I'm like,
you want to do this other thing.
I'm like, if you don't want to go, that's fine. Just tell me you don't want to go. But if you want to go, we need you to be able to bolus yourself for your meals. Mm-hmm. And pull out your Dexcom and look at it and see what your blood sugar is. And when you're low, look at somebody at camp and be like, hey, I'm low. I need juice or whatever.
And the truth is, it's going to take those examples and he's going to have to do them. I mean, that's how you figure it out. Listen, Arden was in Disney Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. She flew home Monday night. They did provide a nurse who was, on her Dexcom and watching her. I would say probably 3 times the nurse, it was usually overnight where Arden would, I have to admit, one time she dipped down to 66. I wouldn't have done anything about it, but I understand the nurse did. I could tell it was coming back, and it wasn't going to get lower. And the nurse told me later, even when she woke Arden up and she's like, Arden, it's the nurse. And Arden picked up her phone, looked at her blood sugar and went, "Why are you bothering me? I'm okay." And she's like, "No, you're 66. And Arden's like, "This is going to be fine." And she said, just as she was getting ready to describe to her, "Look, do you see how the line's bending in the other direction?" She thought, "Why don't I just drink some of this juice real quick and like make this lady happy and like be done with it, you know?" Meanwhile, the nurse she was terrific. But
great.
that 5 days was a great, like, it made me feel good about like, okay, like she'll be able to go to college.
Right.
And then we have a situation coming up soon where Kelly and I have to be away for a number of days. And Arden's like, "I'm going to stay by myself at the house." And like everything inside of you is like, no, that's not a good idea. But what I really know is that this is a perfect time to try it because at least she'll be in our house. And, you know, we have neighbors and we can set sort of little, like, we can set up some safety things she won't even know about. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And let her try to get through it. It's a good practice run because she is going to go to college, you know?
Right. We would love to. James still goes to the nurse's office. And we would love to progress to that, like texting with him. And he doesn't go to the nurse's office as much, but he's just not ready yet.
Yeah,
but
I
am hoping that the experience of camp, like in a really supportive environment that he wants to be in, like kind of helps him make a little step towards it.
Perfect.
I mean,
it's perfect.
And if it doesn't, I mean, if camp is a flop, then
the next thing will. Then the next thing will help. But I mean, something event. You just have to keep doing those little things. I mean,
exactly.
Listen, Arden's either going to, you know, I don't know too much of her person. Like Arden applied to a number of colleges and then got into all of them. And so she's got her choice at the moment. And, you know, as she whittles it down, it becomes clear she's either going to go into the city or down to Georgia. And, you know, there's part of me that's like, oh, the city's only an hour away. Like, that's good. You know, because if something really went wrong, I could get there in an hour. But then I thought, like, if something went that wrong, 5 minutes is too long. Like, forget an hour, right? So what's the difference if she's in New York or she's in Georgia?
Well,
you know.
And I mean, how many kids go to a school, spend a semester, spend a year, and they're like, this isn't the thing for me. And then they like either come home and regroup or they know what they, you know, where they want to go and they apply to transfer somewhere. I mean, it's not set in stone that like any of our kids will be in that one spot for those 4 years.
Yeah. A lot of things are going to happen. So you have to take advantage of the opportunities to practice. Yeah. That's pretty much it, right? It's doing the same thing and figuring it out how to handle it. And you're going to. I mean, these kids, anybody who's listening, the kid's not going to live with you forever. So
hopefully,
to take advantage of those situations, you know. Irene, I'm having too good of a time talking to you. So if I don't just say goodbye, we're not going to stop. So we're done. Okay, it's over. Is there anything that you wanted to say that I didn't bring up?
Yeah, it's funny because I initially reached out about the nurse thing. Like you've mentioned multiple times that nurses seem to have a harder time. And I think you're right. And I think nurses have to remember to, you know, as they're advocating for their child, right? They have to advocate for themselves because we go to nursing school and we learn a little bit about a ton of different things, but we don't hone in on any particular thing. And then as we start our careers, we do tend to specialize like labor and delivery, critical care. And we don't have a ton of exposure to type 1. We most of us probably see a few type 1s, but not tons of them. And then the other thing we have to remember is that the diabetics that we do come in contact with, especially if we work in the hospital, right, they're not representative of everyone. Mm-hmm. And we have to learn how to kind of separate those fears. Like not everyone that I saw in a wound care center represented the overwhelming majority of adult diabetics.
Right.
And then I think we struggle too, because the way we see things managed in the hospital is not what day-to-day home management looks like. And because we have familiarity with hospital-based management, sometimes home management is uncomfortable. And it's very different. And then you have to learn how to compartmentalize, right? I can't take the style of management that I use with my son and then use it with patients in the hospital. But I can take understanding the importance of a CGM or an insulin pump or carb counting and advocate for my patients in the hospital. This has really caused me to become a huge advocate in my own hospital. We now put CGMs on newly diagnosed patients before they leave the hospital.
Wow, good for you.
And we always had a way for patients to keep their pumps, but we didn't necessarily advertise it. And so now we're doing a better job of saying, if we want someone to take their pump off, of explaining why we want, not just because we're not comfortable with it, but what's going on in this situation that we're asking you to come off your pump, or coming in and asking them, being more proactive to say, like, you're here because you were in a motor vehicle accident. We're a trauma center and you have a fracture and we need to place that bone. We see you're on a pump. Did you want to stay on your pump? And it is hard. And it's, cause there's an assumption that you're just going to know what to do and you don't, and then you feel paralyzed by it. And you have to separate what hospital management looks like and hospital complications with what your life with T1D, being the parent or being the individual yourself, is going to look like.
Right. Well, that's great. And you put that effort in at your own institution and you didn't have much trouble getting those changes made?
I think I was at an advantage in the position that I held, that I have direct, regular contact with executive leadership. And I was able to come back and say to them, like, I would just really love the opportunity to sit down and share my experience as a newly diagnosed parent with you. And what I think we could do differently. And it didn't happen overnight.
Sure.
But it was information sharing, and being able to talk with other families, and then the leadership of our pediatric department being able to go back to our endocrinologist group and say, hey, how do we look at this? And some of it became like education with, like I got called one night that there was a T1D patient who was adamant about keeping their pump, and the trauma resident was like, oh, no way are we doing that. And I was able to come up and like sit down with that resident and say, this is why your patient wants to keep their pump. This is why trying to push them off of their pump is not a good idea. And let me give you some personal perspective in this situation.
Yeah.
And look, like they also have this Dexcom. And so you're actually going to have more information. You're going to be able to walk in at any point and be like, hey, what's your blood sugar look like? And they're going to be able to answer that question for you.
Yeah. I thought a lot of your stories today revolved around not just doing things the way they're always done because they're always done that way. Like seriously, it's a main theme running through how you impacted all of this. And it just shows I guess the I don't want to call it pushback, but the answers you got back from a number of different people along the way just were very reflective of, well, this is how it's done. I don't ask any questions. This is just what we do, and it's so important to follow common sense and to sometimes have to show it to other people and say to them. And
if you can give a logical explanation, right? Like why, like in the hospital, if I can explain to the bedside nurse or to the resident or to a director of a unit why it's actually in their best interest to let this patient keep their CGM and keep their pump.
Right.
Like, why is it an advantage for you? It's better care for them. Oh, and because healthcare is a business, whether we like it or not, in America, healthcare is a business. Why you're going to have a more satisfied customer, being part of it too, then you can start to win people over.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of good reasons to do it. And I guess
I've also had a situation where I've gone to an emergency call and walked in a room and the patient is completely unresponsive and we're not quite sure why they're responsive. And I have physically taken their pump off of them. Like, this patient can no longer manage their pump. We don't know what's going on. The pump is going away.
You have to start over again at that point.
Yeah.
Well, that's a completely different situation. But yeah, that makes sense as well.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. All right, Irene, listen, I would tell you that you are a very common sensey person. I like it a lot. I would say something like, if you ever, need a new husband and both of us are in the bum, to look me up. But I got to be honest with you, I'm not raising your 75 kids, so it doesn't matter to me. You're on your own, okay? But I love talking to you. I really did.
Thank you.
Of course.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Oh, it was great. A huge thank you to one of today's sponsors, Gvoke Glucagon. Find out more about Gvoke HypoPen at gvokeglucagon.com/juicebox. You spell that GVOKEGLUCAGON.com/juicebox. And don't forget to find Touched by Type 1 at touchedbytype1.org and on Facebook and Instagram. Last but not least, the private Facebook group, Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. It's worth your time. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast.